What is going on, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the major label debut by Kendrick Lamar, and this record is called Good Kid, M.A.A.d City, and it came out in the fall of 2012. So basically, Kendrick Lamar had dropped kind of like an independent album in 2011 called Section 80, and had a series of mixtapes throughout the late 2000s and early 2010s. But he had built up a lot of steam in that mixtape and independent kind of grind and stuff, and wound up affiliating with Dr. Dre on his first debut album, kind of like The Game did back in 2005. He had Dr. Dre's affiliation, Drake's affiliation, and people like that were on here. Pharrell, Hit Boy, Just Blaze, or just, some big producers like that were right here immediately. And this was kind of a heralded debut. This is kind of one of the more talked about albums from 2012. And from what I've seen, I've noticed that I've seen that on a couple hip hop websites in the past that this is an album that continues to stay on like the Billboard 200 charts, despite the fact that it's over 10 years old now. It has like the longevity sales where it's kind of like Eminem's Curtain Call, where it just happens to really continue to have popularity despite its age. And this is probably one of the more revolutionary albums of the 2010s. I definitely feel like, at least in terms of rap music, in terms of 2010s rap music, this is one of the central albums for what kind of was a soundscape shifter, kind of like when you think of 50 Cent's Get Rich or Die Tryin', or you think of like the Games documentary, or you think of Kanye West, The College Dropout, or some of those type records, this was definitely a centerpiece of rap music in the 2010s. And the thing about it is, for me, is I remember liking this record by Kendrick Lamar, but I've been kind of almost gun shy about messing with some of the more recent stuff, just because I feel like these kind of mild party vibes. I mean, the more that I listen to this album, the more I realize that Kendrick is really kind of like a storyteller and has introspective and kind of shapely things about his music to kind of say. It's not just strictly just like party vibes, although there are songs like that, like Swimming Pools and Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe. I just kind of feel like it's kind of interspersed between some of these records, and I just don't remember the singles hitting quite as hard with records like To Pimp a Butterfly. I do want to eventually try Damn. That's a record that did seem to have like some chart bops on there that I kind of wanted to see about, but for the time being, I'm gonna mess with this record, and I'm gonna kind of see about. I am gonna mess with Damn down the road, but for the time being, I'm gonna mess with this record. And from what I've seen of this project, it is actually pretty rock solid. Now, I don't feel like it's a 10 out of 10 classic, but that's not saying as if it's a poor record. I do feel like there's a number of bops on here, and it's just kind of the concept that Kendrick, although he is kind of it's kind of the concept. Kendrick is kind of a Nas-like lyricist, and he does incorporate that often on here. But the concept behind it is he just doesn't feel too infatuated or enthralled. I don't want to say he doesn't feel too infatuated with the concept of making some of these albums be chock full of like just bona fide festivities. It's not to say this album is boring, but there's just more on his mind than just strictly doing songs like Swimming Pools and Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe and stuff. But I do, at least, I would have to say I like this album for the concept of being able to have the magnitude of all the hype and build up that this album particularly had, and just being able to manifest it into an album that was worthwhile the acclaim and hit home. It didn't wind up winning Rap Album of the Year at the 2014 Grammys because Macklemore, of all people, topped him. But I do kind of feel like this is basically like a California classic in recent times, where there just weren't a ton of West Coast gangster rap kind of folks back in the 2010s. When I think about it, Game really switched up his style at this time. Like, there's weren't a ton of folks from really the 2010s that were really doing it. I think maybe Schoolboy Q is from like the West Coast and stuff, but this is pretty much a central album. And this was like the next phase if you're just a complete fan of Dr. Dre and like that West Coast sound of NWA, Eazy-E, some of those type folks, and you've made it all the way out to 2012. This is like a pretty signified record to kind of mess with. It's just very typical of that style. So we'll go ahead and talk about the singles. The first single is The Recipe. In my opinion, this is a very floaty, kind of soulful, smoking out kind of song. This definitely feels like a musing and hotbox kind of song. Definitely one for hotboxing in the car and kind of musing, just thought-provoking, introspective type stuff, just with a smoking kind of sense of it. Just either you're in a vehicle or just at some smoked out home, something like that. Just something to really kind of get introspective and kind of ask questions and that type of stuff, or just have more thoughts on your head. And I really like the fact that Dr. Dre's on here. Now, I would recommend getting the deluxe edition. That's the version I'm reviewing. Is 17-song deluxe edition on Spotify and stuff. But this song has Kendrick Lamar and Dr. Dre trading bars like they had collaborated on songs for like the past 15 or 20 years or something. It's just interesting that they had just that instant kind of chemistry just like that. And this is pretty much one of the only real Dr. Dre verses I can think of from the 2010s. I mean, the last time I really checked in with Dr. Dre, apart from this album, this was like the only real album I remember checking in with Dr. Dre in the 2010s, apart from Compton from 2015. And the last time I had really checked in with Dr. Dre before that was on Relapse Refill by Eminem. So it's just kind of, he took some breaks and he just wasn't here that much. He did less. He was kind of focused on his Beats by Dre headphones line and that type of stuff. So it was just interesting when something actually did catch Dr. Dre's attention. And it just worked. These are hit songs. I like both The Recipe and Compton, the song off of Good Kid, M.A.A.d City. So I just would have to say some of these are really good. But this is a real soulful kind of song. It's interesting to kind of get Dr. Dre on some of his Chronic vibes. It's kind of in like a more soulful 2010s type vibe. Second single is Swimming Pools Drank, and this is a pretty basic vanilla night cut. I definitely feel like this one has night venue vibes, but it gives goosebumps, I would have to say, but it is somewhat calm. I just like the overall energy of this song, but it just is not quite as excited and as exhilarated as most standard club songs kind of are and stuff. This is just kind of has a fantastic chorus, this real exuberant kind of energy when it gets to the chorus, but the verses are just kind of so effortless and just kind of just regular about it. It just kind of feels like, I mean, the lyrics are of course pretty slick, but it is kind of such a basic vanilla beat. It's just kind of like if you think of like a stock nightclub song from like the 2010s, especially when it comes to rap music, this is probably one that I would recommend in that sense, just because I can't think, me trying to think of like an overabundance, when you think of like Drake's Hotline Bling or something like that, or like the song that YG did, with Jeezy, or the song that Yo Gotti did with YG and Jeezy and that type of stuff. Just some of those typical kind of songs. This one's just a pretty stock and basic vanilla nightclub song. I just feel like that's the kind of concept. This has a real kind of just plotting and kind of brooding kind of production on there, but it's just very simple, and it just feels like this would be played countless nights at nightclubs. This is kind of one of the stock songs to turn back to, at least if you want to give off that early 2010s type feel. But it's just an overall hit. Great chorus, just great emphasis of a song. Kendrick needs a ton more songs like this. I mean, he has some good stuff, but this is definitely a highlight for him. And the third single is Backseat Freestyle. And I don't really recommend this song to you. I just could not get into like the belly kind of production on Backseat Freestyle. It just did not emphasize to me as far as being like a real highlight for how that one kind of went. I mean, I do like freestyles in terms of that concept, especially when they hit over a song, but I really feel like probably the beat that was selected for Backseat Freestyle should have just been a lot more interesting. It's just kind of surprising that one was just not more concocted. It is good to get freestyles kind of on like an album as opposed to like a mixtape or something, but it just didn't really strike me as very compelling. The fourth single is Poetic Justice, and this one's a real good track for the ladies. It has Drake on here. Both these guys just kind of do their smooth stepping kind of vibes on here. Just a real nice slow jam kind of cut. Has a very nice sample. It's very addictive. Just something that feels really kind of ripped out of 1993, like the movie Poetic Justice with Janet Jackson and Tupac. So it's just a nice one there. Breezy ladies cut, as smooth as butter, that type of stuff. Just has a real contemporary kind of energy about it. Both Kendrick and Drake do a nice job, and this is just an overall good single. This is a great follow-up. This was one of the first songs I heard by Kendrick back in the day, between this song, Swimming Pools, and some of those. But I just look after the concept. This is an example of how to continue to promote an album after an album comes out, because by this point in the 2010s, most people were just putting out pre-singles as opposed to post-singles. But this was an example of an album that really kind of carried some further chart energy, and it lasted. So this is a good example of a hit here. The fifth single is Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe, and I remember really liking this song back in the day also. This one just has like a hot sky, kind of evening and sunset kind of feel towards it. Just a real kind of sunset breeze type song. Just a lazy day. Just really has that kind of like simmering, kind of Florida and Texas and California kind of vibe towards it, just where the heat waves are out, and it just kind of feels like real mellow, and there's not really clouds in the sky and that type of stuff. But I just kind of look after it. This has that kind of, I mean, this is more of a summer song, where I feel like Poetic Justice I feel like Poetic Justice strikes me as more of like a winter song, and Swimming Pools is just kind of a summer hit. But Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe is definitely just like a crest of summer, just hot July, August day kind of stuff in there, something like that. Just an overall good. It has a pretty good hook. Also, this feels like a meme. Just saying, "Bitch, don't kill my vibe." Feels like a hashtag that you'd find on Instagram or something. So that's kind of the thing. So to talk about some of these, the version of the album I'm reviewing is the 17 song version off of Spotify. So that basically adds 5 songs to the 12-song package, which would be the 5 songs that you get. Also would be the Recipe, Black Boy Fly, Now or Never, and then like the Recipe Black Hippie remix, and then Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe remix with Jay-Z. So that's just kind of the concept, but really I'm just going to review it as if it were 15 songs, because basically the 2 remixes, the Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe remix, and then the other one, the Recipe remix, are just basically the same song, just with extra folks on there. I mean, I know it's pretty heralded to get Kendrick's group Black Hippie on there, but it doesn't have too overabundance of a contribution. I just feel like the original version is better. So out of 15 songs, I'm going to go ahead and recommend the 8.5 that I recommend. So that's actually pretty good on here. Um, Here they are. The 8.5 songs are The Recipe, Swimming Pools Drank, Poetic Justice, Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe, Compton, Now or Never, Good Kid, Money Trees, and the almost song is Shireen, aka Master Splinter's daughter. I'll talk about some of these. So basically, another hit that's pretty city like, and I like these Dr. Dre and Kendrick Lamar tunes, would be Compton. This is a pretty hit song. I definitely feel like this Just Blaze beat. It's kind of odd getting an East Coast producer like Just Blaze on a song like this on a West Coast kind of vibe. I feel like this is a very starry kind of night city skies kind of song, very flashy and festive. This feels like you're stepping through the Los Angeles and San Francisco skies and some of that type of stuff, the city lights and some of those festive kind of vibes about it. It's a real kind of stepping out kind of one. I feel like Now or Never with Mary J. Blige is another stepping out one. This one's a little bit more sophisticated and fancy. I definitely feel like this one's kind of promo like. I like the piano beat on here. It just really feels like a stepping out for like a social night or a date night, something like that. It's just kind of the sort of stuff that Rick Ross would do. It's a little bit more mellow in kind of its approach and not quite as much of a party jam. It's just kind of more dressed up a little bit, just kind of reflecting and just kind of appreciating the sights. Just something more promo like in a more relaxed sense. I definitely like the tune of how that goes. Good Kid is a pretty nice one. This is a real kind of hookah song. Song number 7, Good Kid, where there's 2 songs on here. One song is Good Kid, one song is Mad City. The Good Kid song, I like this one. It just really feels like hookah and solid smoke session music. It's very floaty song, very similar to like The Recipe and Money Trees, especially. I feel like I like the fact that Kendrick had some of these smoke session, like Swishers and Ziggies and that type of stuff to really kind of sit there and smoke and that sort of thing. This one is just very kind of Middle Eastern like and just kind of like Egyptian almost, something that kind of vibe. Just really gave me some hookah and smoke session kind of vibes towards it. And then Money Trees is just a very summery one. This one is kind of a smoke session song. It's like a solid one. Maybe not as smoke ready as The Recipe, but definitely pretty decently smoke heavy. And it just feels like for a hot, wavy summer day, it just has that kind of summer energy about it. Very similar to Bitch Don't Kill My Vibe. Maybe a little bit hotter, maybe a little less hotter. It just kind of feels somewhere within that vibe of just some of these. I mean, it's interesting that Kendrick kind of gave off some summery kind of California kind of vibes about it. Because that's something that Dr. Dre and NWA did back in the 80s and 90s, is just give off the cityscape, going through the city, and just kind of the approach of just being out and about, city hopping, bar hopping, that type of stuff, cruising around throughout Compton and Los Angeles and Inglewood and some of those places back in 1993 and 1989 and stuff. Just interesting getting like a 2012 rendition of that. So these are some good ones. I also like J Rock on this song. He's from Black Hippie, so he did a good job on here. I'm gonna have to review more J Rock. Trying to think of some more songs I haven't talked about. Oh yeah, Shireen, aka Master Splinter's daughter. Shireen, aka Master Splinter's daughter. This one really struck me as like a lo-fi kind of house party tune, which there weren't an overabundance of house party tunes on here, but there were definitely a bunch of smoke sessions and a couple club bops on here. But this is definitely a house party one. This feels like a zone out kind of song. Maybe you're smoking a little bit, but maybe women are more in mind for this particular song. Just a lo-fi kind of pull some chick aside, that type of stuff at a house party kind of vibe towards it. I do like the concept of it. It is kind of a storytelling song, so it's not just strictly party vibes. It's just kind of Kendrick talking about his days in the past and some of that. That just kind of happens to be a thing. But to talk about some of the songs I didn't enjoy, me not liking 5.5. So there were 9 songs I basically liked, but then the other 6 songs, like I already talked about, not liking Backseat Freestyle. I didn't really like the production on the Art of Peer Pressure. M.A.A.d City, I didn't like the beat switch up. I mean, I kind of would have liked the first half of M.A.A.d City, but that's the part that I feel like MC8 should have rapped on. I feel like West Coast Giant like MC8 should have been on that more quick pace. They kind of switched it up and put him on this kind of hazy, kind of distorted, kind of house party type feel of it in the second half of the song, but it just felt kind of odd for MC8 to kind of be at those kind of house party sessions when he's an OG by the way out in 2012 point. So he definitely should have been on something more hype and more exhilarating to kind of see him on something that could have been like a street single or something. I felt like songs like Sing About Me, I'm Dying of Thirst, and Real with Anna Wise, both of these are very long songs, which I just don't overly thoroughly kind of enjoy and stuff. I didn't see myself really listening to like a 12-minute song. And it's kind of the same thing with Real, that being a 7.5-minute song. So those are some other ones. I felt like Black Boy Fly was kind of this like an odd one that just didn't quite have as much. I mean, maybe it was trying to be introspective, but it just didn't quite pull it off quite as well. The Art of Peer Pressure was kind of being like an album cut type song with just more of a story to tell, but that one just didn't quite have as much contemporary feels about it. I mean, it was a decent one for being able to say that it did have a story worth it to tell, but if like you're trying to kind of loosen up a little bit more, it just wasn't quite as much of a vibe for that. So it's just kind of a different instillment from what I kind of wanted more of, but it does have some lyricism on there. And I would also have to say that I would also have to say that Black Boy Fly was trying to be like a soulful kind of song on here, but it just didn't quite pull it off as well as like the Recipe did, and it just didn't quite pull it off as well as the Recipe and Poetic Justice and some of those type ones. I mean, that one was. I feel like I like Kendrick Lamar in like this. I like Kendrick Lamar in the singles, but it just felt like in some of these album cuts, it seems like he kind of struggled somewhat to come up with like compelling topics. Because I feel like for the most part, he was trying to establish like his bar for bar storytelling lyricism more so than trying to establish like further cuts as far as having like better, more festive times. And that's kind of the battle that kind of goes along with this project is you get some solid lyricism on here and just the concept of seeing things that for like a critic standpoint and a more rave standpoint as far as like national attentiveness, it wins the accolades just because it provides like food for thought communion. But I just look after it, it doesn't really do as much for trying to establish like trying to have some of these moments that are not quite as serious and just more have more frivolity to them. So I mean, I feel like me liking 8.5 songs out of 15. Most of the songs I selected for you in that sense have some pretty rave kind of amounts towards it. But you have to say that this album was trying to be, I think it really was trying to be like a album on the quality of like Straight Outta Compton and The Chronic and Doggy Style and Illmatic and some of those. That's kind of the art of what you get when you have like the components to have an aim for wanting to be a 5-star album, as it kind of lessens the vibe, because I just don't see too many party albums nowadays being 5-star albums from like Rolling Stone and All Music and other places like that, and some of those typical kind of professional critic standpoints. They just don't really throw those accolades at people that just have like 10 club records and 5 ladies records and dance records and that type of stuff. So it has that aim, and I feel like to that extent, if you're looking for that concept, it does have that fulfillment. But in my personal like insight, or in my personal affluence for what I thought from it, it didn't connect as much because of just like the landscape difference from what I was looking for in that concept. So this is kind of thing. But to that remark, I will give this album basically me liking like 8.5 songs out of 15, counting the 3 new bonus songs, but not the 2 remixes. I feel like 8.5 out of 15. I would give this album either a 6.75 or a 7. I'm just trying to real. I think I'll give it a 6.75. I feel like that's pretty rock solid. Just to be able to say I liked 4 out of 5 of the singles, and there were quite a few cuts on here to be able to do it, but I still feel like 8 out of 15 is still more than a few that I just was not wholesomely sold on. I don't know why Kendrick put a 12-minute song on here and then a 7.5 one. I mean, most of the songs on this album are over 5 minutes, so it's not like these are just jingles and like 3.5 minute, 4.5 minute songs like the typical albums that you get that are just filled with like packaged and kind of snappy singles and stuff. So this project just has a lot more to say, and it kind of makes up room more than other projects. So, but I feel like 6.75 is still pretty solid. I liked enough about this project. It does have a number of hits, and Kendrick can have a good time when he wants to have that about him. But it's just kind of the concept that, yeah, I look after the concept. I just think Kendrick had a more forecasted aim for this project, more so than just trying to just be like a local legend and that type of stuff. So that's just what you get. It was just aiming for like the same territory as like Doggy Style and some of those. But in terms of the social score, I will give the social score like an 8 out of 10 because I feel like there's a number of bops on here, at least 9 or so songs that kind of have a real social, contemporary kind of feel. It's something that's basically like the 2010s version of Doggy Style or something when you think of tunes like Ain't No Fun If the Homies Can't Have None and Gin and Juice and some of those type records from that, Lottie Dottie and some of those that were just party jams from California. This is like a more recent update in like the West Coast, strictly Compton and Los Angeles and California kind of feel. And as a bonus, there's some West Coast giants on here like Dr. Dre and m.A.A.d. You got some contemporaries like J Rock and Drake and just stuff like that overall. So it has some good hooks. Even Mary J. Blige is on here, so that's pretty good. This really happens to be a thing. So 8 social. In terms of the future, like Kendrick just dropped an album back in 2022, and that won like the rap album of the year from the Grammys and stuff. I just would have to say I do want to review Kendrick Lamar's 2017 album, Damn. I do want to review Kendrick Lamar's 2017 album, Damn, and I probably will soon enough. But I'm just going to have to say, from what I've seen from some of this is pretty solid. But I wonder if the rest of his albums have this sort of quality.